Hey there, welcome back. It's Wednesday, March 13th, 2024. I'm Mike Riston, and this is 10-Minute Exposure, the YouTube podcast horrible amalgamation thing, where I talk about a photographer that I think you should be paying attention to, and is exactly what I'm not going to do today. Today, I want to talk about some advice that I read on Threads. Now, before I jump into this, I want to make it perfectly clear that my intended audience for this specific episode is actually me 10 years ago, and anyone who might be like me 10 years ago. This isn't a podcast episode for professional photographers or for very financially sound or well-off photographers. And I guess I'll jump right into it by saying that the advice was well-spirited, it was very well-intentioned, I assume noble intent. But for photographers who were like me, it can feel a little like you're inadequate as an artist. Now, the advice went something like this. If you're torn between two cameras and you can't decide which one you want to buy, just buy both. Test them both out for a little bit. See what you like and what you don't like. And then when you're done with your camera and you've made your final decision, return the one that you don't like and hold on to the one that you do. On the surface, this is good advice. I am a big proponent of trialing things before you make long-term commitments. But I also understand that for many photographers out there, this is an expensive hobby. This isn't a profession. This isn't a way of making a living or bringing in a vast amount of income. This is just something that you do either for fun or to connect with the world around you or to meet other people. The list goes on and on. But you're not in a financial situation where you can afford to be making big purchases. And let's be frank, a camera is a big purchase. Equipment is very expensive. Lenses are not cheap. Flashes and lighting and strobes and backdrops and computers and software all can be very cost prohibitive for people that are trying to find enjoyment in the hobby. This is compounded by a photographic culture where gear is really the easiest and most common thing that people can talk about when it comes to the craft. And so the focus shifts from creating good work or creating art that you're proud of, and more talking about equipment and what is best and what is not best and what is less than ideal and why you should be on the newest, bestest version of whatever. And for photographers who are like me, who are operating on a budget, who don't have the financial freedom to drop a couple thousand every time a new version of a camera drops, this can feel like you're not keeping up with other artists, that you're somehow lesser than. And I want to tell you that this could not be farther from the truth. Now, full disclosure, I am using a Canon 6D Mark I from 2015 that I picked up when it was drastically marked down because the Mark II had come out. I'm using a used Sigma 35mm lens that I got from MPB. My computer is a 2015 iMac. I'm using DxO PhotoLab 6, not even the newest version of that, because I had other things that I wanted to spend my money on when version 7 dropped. I'm producing this on QuickTime Media Player. I'm doing all of my video editing in iMovie. My webcam is a Logitech C922. It's used. I'm using a USB microphone that I got used off eBay, and I'm using a $10 key light to offset the terrible lighting behind me. This is my hobby. This is YouTube. This isn't a moneymaker for me, and this isn't where my passions lie. This is something I do to connect with other photographers, and because I hate typing, I have old man fingers, typing hurts, talking is easier. Photography is not about the equipment. And sure, without the equipment, you couldn't be creating photographs. But in my mind, and this is something I've learned over the last 10 years especially, photography is less about what you're making the art with and more about why you're making it. What's your reason? Why are you getting out into the world or into the studio or with other creatives to make work? What calls to you and how are you realizing your vision? And when you're in an environment like social media in particular, or YouTube, where you're constantly being bombarded by opinions and voices about what's the best and why you should be using the Fuji X100 VI and you should immediately trade in the X100 V that you just bought because now the 6 is here, you can lose sight of that artistic vision pretty quickly. Don't get caught up in the gear talk. Gear is exciting. It's fun to buy a new camera. But it is not fun to put yourself into a financial situation where you are going into debt or doing without necessities on a day-to-day basis so that you can keep up with other photographers online. Don't do that to yourself. All of the work that I create on used 10-year-old equipment. And I love it because with that equipment, I've grown comfortable with how it works. I'm comfortable and am less reactive and more proactive in how I do my work out in the field. It is an extension of me. I'm not spending time learning new controls or testing out film recipes. I know what works for me, and I'm not limited by that. And knock on wood, I don't have to buy new equipment anytime soon. I can continue to make and create the things that I enjoy and the pictures that I enjoy with the equipment that I enjoy. If you're consternated about your gear, really take a moment and reflect on why it is you're feeling limited by it. Just because you're shooting with the Ricoh GR2 and not the GR3 or the rumored GR4 doesn't mean you can't create good work. Ask yourself, are you printing billboard-size prints? Or is the spirit of your work to be viewed on a screen or printed small in a book or shared as a print with other photographers? If that's the case, you don't need the latest and greatest. You can make exceptional work with what you have. Just take the time to learn your gear. And certainly don't break the bank on somebody else's behalf. What you should be spending your money on, besides, necessities on a day-to-day basis, the things that you should be spending your money on are things that fulfill and grow you spiritually as a photographer. And I'm not talking spiritually in the religious sense. I'm speaking spiritually in the sense of you finding a real joy from the craft, which is why you started doing this in the first place. Spend your money printing your work. Look at your work physically, not just on a screen. Show other people your prints. Take them with you when you go to photographic meetups or book clubs or to the camera store and show other people what you're creating and leave the gear out of it. Don't talk about what you used to make it. Just talk about what drew you to the scene, why the composition mattered to you, why you felt it was so important to photograph. And that can be as simple as the scene just called to me and I wanted to photograph it. I wanted to see what this looked like photographed. There's so much gear out there, and there's so many ways to feel inadequate on social media. Metrics, like counts, follower counts, hashtags that you're using, whether you're a digital photographer or an analog photographer, and none of it matters if at the end of the day, you're not creating work that fulfills you. And even then, if you are creating work that speaks to you and broadcasts your vision to your intended audience, whether that's 10 people or 10,000 people, the gear is secondary. The metadata is secondary. It's not even secondary. It's probably tertiary to the scale of 1,000. Instead of spending your money on gear, spend your money printing your work. Buy books. You can learn so much from photo books. You can buy them used. You can check them out from your library if you are inclined to be able to do that, or if your library has a robust enough photo book section. Many of these photographers have their work published on their portfolios. Look at the work of other people and spend your money supporting them and having physical, actual, real, tangible books that you can look at. Spend your money traveling. Not just for the sake of making photos, but for the sake of getting out and enriching your life and seeing what this world has to offer. And if along the way you have experiences that you want to photograph, then that should be the goal. The goal should be not to make photographs, but to experience things that are photo worthy. And when you start hitting concrete roadblocks with your gear, if your sensor isn't up to the task of taking long exposure night photographs, if your flash just isn't bright enough to illuminate the scenes that you're shooting, if your camera is physically broken and just doesn't make work, then start having the conversation about buying new equipment. And again, if you're a professional and your livelihood depends on this, this is not a YouTube podcast monster for you. This is for that amateur photographer like me, who's sitting at home reviewing the work that they're making with the 10, 15-year-old gear that they've been using for, a long time now, and are feeling that they are somehow less than because the Fuji X100 dropped and everybody and their mom wants you to know about it. Don't feel inadequate because somebody else makes you feel inadequate. Make work that you're proud of, connect with photographers who lift you up, and ignore the gear talk. It is the most basic, mundane, boring conversation you can have as a photographer. I hope this resonates with somebody. I certainly wish somebody had said this to me a long, long time ago. I would have spent a lot less money on things that I ended up not using in the long run, instead of just investing time to find joy in the things I already had. If this resonated with you, let me know. I'd be curious to connect with you and actually really connect with you. I don't mean that in the sense that I'm looking to piggyback off of your engagement. I really mean that. Leave a comment. I love hearing from other photographers about your craft and your vision. If you staunchly disagree with me and think that I am the Antichrist for saying this, let me know. I'm curious to hear that. I feed off of your negativity. It makes me a better person. And ignore the talking heads on YouTube out there, except for me, because I'm the only one that's right. I'm going to go back to reading my book. This is Michella Bredahl's Love Me Again, published by Loose Joints. Phenomenal press, phenomenal photographer. This is a book of environmental portraits, and I've learned so much from it just through how Michella sees her subjects. And I've taken away so many things from it that I want to try in my own work. And that's where you should be spending your time and your resources. Growing your vision, not growing your camera arsenal. And certainly not growing your credit card debt because somebody said you need a new camera. Have a good one. I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.